afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. Glad to be with you back again on Facebook Live, and looking forward to the things we're going to cover today, trying to direct traffic here, get the door shut, and so we can get rid of all the noise as I was trying to figure out what in the world is going on and why this wasn't working. But so glad to see all of you popping up there on the side, checking in from all over the country and world. And just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about some of the things happening. And of course, we'll jump on the COVID thing and all that. But, you know, I think as we talked about last time, we have to recognize that there's something going on, that the pandemic is being used as a vehicle to advance. And we're finding more and more evidence of that. And as I told you last time, you know, conspiracy theories and all that, that's not my thing. And I'm not super interested in hype and sensationalism. I like to deal with facts and figures. And, you know, we've all heard the phrase coming out of the closet and, you know, different variations of that and applications of it in recent years. Well, there's another group that's kind of coming out, and they've been in the wings and really been moving forward into mainstream speak, so to speak. And, you know, we're hearing more and more labels being associated with them. And now we've got statements that are just including what their label is or what their category is, and that is progressives. And this thing that we're all experiencing and all the problems that we're seeing happening around the world, all the economic impact, is being used unashamedly by the progressives to advance their cause. And I want to share with you why this is important to us, what it means to us prophetically. And, you know, we never, ever want to say that we know the date of the rapture, we know when the tribulation is going to begin, because we don't know those things. If Jesus said you can't know him, then you can't know him, and that's the end of that debate. But we can see the day approaching, as Hebrews 10:25 tells us, and we indeed are seeing things that tell us that, as we talked about last time, things that will happen to their fullness in the tribulation are advancing even now. Because there are a few guys that seem to be on the news every day, and it seems to be curious of why this particular group is always in the front of people. And a portion of that is because they're progressives, all of them. And one of them is being groomed for the next presidential run, not in 2020, but possibly 2024. We know California governors have made their way to the White House in time past. And Fox News reports a story I want to read a portion from. And this headline reads, California's Newsom says coronavirus provides opportunity to push progressive agenda. California Governor Gavin Newsom sees an opportunity to use the coronavirus outbreak to usher in new progressive policies in his state and elsewhere in the country, he said on Wednesday. Absolutely, we see this as an opportunity to reshape, now listen to this, to reshape the way we do business and how we govern. A new way of governing in the United States that has a constitution that tells us how we are to govern, amendments to that tells us what we can allow and what we cannot. He said this during a virtual press conference, and remark came near the end of a long, winding answer to a question about whether he saw the potential in the crisis for a new progressive era in state and national politics. Newsom said, that shouldn't put shivers up the spines of one party or the other, he said. I think it's an opportunity anew for both parties to come together and meet this moment and really more systemically, not situationally, not just about getting out of this moment. In other words, he is saying and confessing to seeing this as an opportunity that can be exploited to further the progressive agenda. Now, here's something interesting. As I was looking at statistics today regarding progressivism, 84% of Democratic candidates in the 2020 election, no matter what level of office they're running from, 84% of Democratic candidates assign themselves the title of progressive. So what is a progressive? Well, in looking that up, I found an article actually from a rather progressive newspaper, the Huffington Post. They ran an article that was examining and explaining de Blasio's progressive agenda to combat income equality. And it defined the progressive agenda like this. It is the agenda that identifies the pillars upon which healthy social structures can be built. Each pillar is designed to improve, save the lives of vulnerable populations, addressing everything from financial traps to failing schools to jobs to methods for strengthening families and communities. Each pillar of support enhances the lives of the poor and the middle class, which in turn benefits the whole society. The difference between understanding oneself and as a citizen and understanding oneself as a taxpayer is not merely wide. Listen to this, it's antagonistic. A citizen thinks primarily about his or her community and is preoccupied with the safety of the neighborhood, the health of the elderly and disabled, the well-being of the young. A taxpayer thinks mostly about himself or herself, about who or what is taxing, that is to say, taking his hard-earned money to give some to the undeserving body or some other distant, wasteful thing. The progressive agenda seeks to return us to citizenship, the happily adult responsibility of being citizens to each other. It's concerned with how to ensure a livable wage for us all, how to improve schools in all of our neighborhoods, how to protect working class jobs and pensions from predators who rely on exploitation and selfish behavior, how to welcome the immigrant, the huddled masses. Now, that's all code for what we call socialism. And basically what they're saying is they are taking a Robin Hood type position to where we're going to fight on behalf of the poor and the middle class and the immigrant. We're going to welcome, as the statue or the placard on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty says, welcoming the huddled masses of the world. And it all sounds good. And of course it sounds good. Nothing is going to be progressed, if I use the pun, any further if it doesn't have some type of element to it that's appealing to the masses. And this is what they're saying. You know, we need to deal with this income inequality issue. Everybody needs to make the same pay. That's socialism. We need to make sure everyone can get educated without cost. That's socialism. We need to make sure that everyone is protected and receiving the same pension and scale and protected from the predators who would be amongst the wealthy or the one percenters. And again, that's socialism. But the interesting part about that is that these progressives are going to be part of the one percenters who have control over the everything else that everyone else is destined to live on, and the meager supply that socialism brings into people's lives. Now, again, the important thing for us to take note of is that this is being advanced through the pandemic, through the COVID-19 pandemic, which indeed we know clearly is taking the lives of people around the world. But listen to this story. This came on Yahoo News just before we went live, at least the first time. And the second attempt, we'll get a chance to read through it. The headline reads, reopening states will cause, now listen to this, will cause 233,000 more people to die from coronavirus, according to the Wharton model. New data from the University of Pennsylvania suggests that relaxing lockdowns across U.S. cities and states could have serious consequences for the country's battle to contain the coronavirus, which has infected over 1 million people while killing more than 66,000. According to Penn Wharton budget model, reopening states will result in an additional 233,000 deaths from the virus, even if states don't reopen and at all, and with social distancing rules in place. That means that if states were to reopen, 350,000 people in total would die from coronavirus by the end of June. What that means is that they're saying that in the next 60 days, 284,000 people are going to die of coronavirus if we reopen cities, if we allow businesses to reopen again. And you know, it's important for us to remember that we have been told since the very beginning that the whole point of the shelter-in-place orders, the whole point of the social distancing is that so we can slow the flow into the hospitals, which we all have heard are laying off people, shutting down multiple floors of hospitals. Nurses are being laid off. Doctors are being furloughed. I personally know one who has been furloughed. And yet here we're being told that, you know, really if we go back to, you know, a normal type of life, we're going to start killing people again. We're seeing reports of a massive increase in the cities that have reopened or allowed people on the beaches. Some were reporting some 22% upgrade, so to speak, in the number of infections, or increase, that's the word I was looking for, sorry, increase in the number of infections from people who've been back out on the streets and ignoring social distancing for 2 days. Now, we talked about this last time, that that's impossible. Nobody can know that number because this has an incubation period of up to 14 days. So how can they be reporting statistics after 2 days when people have been exercising their civil rights, so to speak, to go out and pursue life, liberty, and happiness? And if happiness for some means going to the beach, that's what they've been doing. We've been seeing major protests here in Southern California, thousands of people down in Huntington Beach protesting the shutdown orders. And we in Orange County have been very fortunate to have less than 2,500 confirmed infections here. We've had just over 50 people who have died in the 3.3 million people, almost 3.3 million people that live here. But here again, now remember what we've talked about since the beginning. There's a need in order to further the agenda of the progressive to maintain a level of panic. So we heard about these models that all proved wrong. The World Health Organization model about how many people were going to die globally, that was wrong. Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx's model of how many people were going to die in the United States, that was wrong. The reports and the models from the CDC, those were wrong. Every prediction about the number of fatalities in the United States has been wrong. Now we've seen people getting a hold of that information, people saying, hey, you know what? We need to get back out there. We need to get back to work. The impacts outside of the economic impact are now beginning to manifest themselves in our homes. Like we talked about last time, we're seeing an increase in domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, all the other things that financial strains are going to create on the home front. So what are we seeing now? We're seeing another article. If we don't keep this thing locked down, there's going to be another 284,000 people that die in the next 60 days. Well, listen, this thing's been with us since January 21st of this year. Some say that it actually hit California back in November, and I would probably lean in that direction because the evidence seems to be substantiating that with the number of people I've talked to who had the COVID-19 type symptoms, most not as dramatic as what we have seen. But once again, we're now having this panic being forced upon us, telling us, listen, you can't go outside. You got to stay locked down. And there are others who are trying to advance this narrative, which are controlling the flow of information that we're all receiving by and large. We live in a different era. Radio has seen its days, so to speak. And radio, basically, when television came along, it took a major hit. Now television is taking a major hit, at least as we know it. People are watching through other means. I mean, they're watching on a device that we call a TV, but the method through which what they're watching has changed. Radio has lost more followers because now we have podcasts, MP3s. Also, what are we doing right now? Most of you are watching on some type of device or on Roku or some other way to broadcast through your television. And we're coming through Facebook to talk to you. Now, get this. The BBC is reporting that Facebook is going to ban events that violate social distancing orders. And Facebook has banned event listings that violate government and social distancing policies. And on Monday, the social media giant removed the listing for four anti-quarantine protests in California, New Jersey, and Nebraska. The discussion sparked outrage from some, including the son of President Donald Trump, who claimed the company's move violated free speech. And protests have been planned for across the U.S., calling for the lifting of stay-at-home orders. And Facebook said it consulted with local governments and would only take down events that violated the state's guidelines. So once again, the state's in control. Now the state's in control of Facebook. And this is exactly where all this is leading, where there's but a few people on the surface of the earth who are telling us what we can do, what we ought to think, and how we ought to behave. Fox News reports that the Chicago mayor threatened to issue citations and arrest people who ignore the stay-at-home order. He said, we will shut you down. She said, I'm sorry, we will shut you down. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot said Friday that police will issue citations and possibly arrest any resident who fails to follow stay-at-home orders aimed at limiting the spread of COVID-19. We will shut you down. We will cite you, speaking of businesses that chose to open. And if we need to, we will arrest you and we will take you to jail, she said during a Saturday press conference. Lightfoot said Chicago police broke up gatherings of between 50 and 150 people on Friday night, and that authorities were tipped off. They're snitching, like we talked about last time. Authorities were tipped off to at least 6 parties and gatherings that were set for Saturday night. This is being reported by ABC 7 Chicago. Now, here's an interesting story, and this is how this is impacting the thinking of many in the world. This next story kind of comes from the opposite end of the spectrum, but we need to mention it because of where it comes from. The Santa Barbara Press. Santa Barbara is a major liberal town. I don't know if most of you are aware that here in Southern California, you can't have a plastic straw. You can only have a paper straw. They don't give you straws in the restaurant anymore. You have to ask for them. There's none on the counter for you to just take. They're usually behind the counter, and you have to ask someone working there if you can have one. And this was all born in Santa Barbara because they were trying to protect some turtles, because a turtle was found with a straw stuck up one of his nostrils. Now, this is why this is interesting, because this is coming from the Santa Barbara News Press. The headline reads, "We are living in tyranny. If there were any doubt the Wuhan virus, through our elected officials, has taken over every aspect of our lives, Governor Newsom's arbitrary and unconstitutional actions prove it. Until this virus," listen to this, "became a political weapon, it was just another run-of-the-mill virus." Now, look to see what both Pelosi and Fauci were saying in January and February versus what they're both saying today. It has become clear that they realized that they can use the virus as a weapon to make their political or political policy changes and to further damage a duly elected president. Listen, part of this, and the reason that this panic has to be continued and the level has to remain the same, is because we are months away from the most pivotal election in the United States history. It is very definitely going to be a defining moment as to what direction our country is going to go next year when the new president is sworn in January. And therefore, there are those who are trying to make the next ballots be cast online, because it's unsafe to go to the polling place. You can go to Costco, you can go to Home Depot, you can go to the grocery store, you can go anywhere else, but you can't go to a polling place because it would be unsafe and potentially spread COVID-19. Therefore, you need to be able to vote online, which is something that can be manipulated and hacked into. I think we all understand that type of terminology in our day. But it's interesting to see that the Santa Barbara News Press is reporting about Governor Newsom becoming a dictator. And his most recent, listen to this, yesterday's most recent stupidity was to close all beaches and all state parks. And Mayor Murillo, Santa Barbara mayor, never wanted to show leadership, acquiesced to these new rules, saying, "We will follow his order." So you got a progressive Democrat saying, "I'll follow the progressive Democrat's orders." Now, interesting, the Washington Times is reporting that the coronavirus hype is going to be the biggest political hoax in history. And the article says the new coronavirus is real. The response to the coronavirus is hyped. And in time, this hype will be revealed as a political hoax. In fact, COVID-19 will go down as one of the political world's biggest, most shamefully overblown, overhyped, overly and irrationally inflated, and outright deceptively flawed responses to a health matter in American history. One that was carried largely on the lips of medical professionals who have no business running a national economy or government. And the facts are this: COVID-19 is a real disease. COVID-19 sickens some. COVID-19 proves fatal to others, mostly the elderly. COVID-19 does nothing to the vast majority. Now, again, we don't want to downplay the fact that 66,000 American lives have been lost. Over 250,000 people around the world have died. And we also need to recognize that we have had some numbers doctoring that we've talked about in previous updates, and that continues to this day. And let me just offer a word of caution. There's been a story floating around that the CDC basically cut their fatality rate numbers in half a few days ago. Well, that didn't really happen. And someone had taken a snapshot of one particular time frame and used the totals as representative of the totals of the whole time that COVID-19 has been with us. So we need to be careful about what we're promoting out there and watch over all of these things, or be careful about promoting these things. But I will say this, they have been including deaths from other causes in the COVID-19 fatality rate, and they've openly stated that. And what they've included is a section of these deaths that are reported as probable deaths. And therefore, you can die of a car accident, but if you had COVID or if you had the coronavirus, well, it contributed to your death, and therefore it's listed as such. And we've all heard these stories. Now, interesting that the Gateway Pundit is reporting on a story. A medical research study finds Western Europe's draconian lockdown may not have saved any lives in comparison to less restrictive measures. There are several things we know today about the Wuhan virus that we did not know 2 months ago. Number one, it is not as dangerous as first reported. The mortality rate is somewhere around 0.1% to 0.3%, similar to a seasonal flu, unlike the 3.4% number that the World Health Organization was throwing around in early March. Secondly, the Wuhan virus is not a threat for children, especially children under 10 who are not transmitters of the disease. Number three, Dr. Fauci was wrong almost every step of the way in understanding and controlling the disease. And number four, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and their poor judgment put over 30 million Americans out of work and killed thousands of businesses. Number four, the World Health Organization pushed these draconian models and used and promoted by Fauci and Birx. And number five, herd immunity is reached safely when a majority of Americans who are young and healthy contract and recover from the disease. The article goes on to mention hydroxychloroquine, which we're hearing conflicting reports on all of that. Some are saying it shows amazing results. Others are saying it does nothing. But listen, here's something that we have to remember. There was a nurse that came out and reported over the past couple of days that she has a friend. She's not from New York, but she has a friend in New York who was saying that basically the New York hospital system is in essence killing people because of some of the procedures that they're using, and because there's some financial attachment, putting someone on a ventilator, putting someone in ICU versus just checking them into the hospital. If that person is on some type of state aid, you're going to get more money if you put them in ICU than if you just check them into a room and monitor them, and you get even more money if you put them on a ventilator. And we've talked about these things in the past, and it's just tragic to even think that that could actually be part of the motivating factor with the death rate to the fatality rate in New York City. Now, here's something that I think is interesting, and this comes from Time Magazine, their online version, time.com. The headline reads, Tokyo reluctantly shuts down some non-essential businesses after coronavirus cases tripled in 10 days. Now, listen to that number, that statistic. The coronavirus cases have tripled in 10 days. An arrival of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe won a partial victory in a bid to get non-essential businesses in Tokyo to close after an emergency was declared over the coronavirus earlier this month. Panchers and internet cafes in the capital will be asked to close. That's a drinking spot or a bar. Bars will be asked to cut back their hours under a plan that will be announced this coming Friday. And the local government plans to put this plan into effect the following day on Saturday. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, here's some wisdom. The state of emergency applies only to 7 of Japan's 47 prefectures. And the residents are requested to avoid non-essential trips within and outside their designated areas. In other words, where the thing is not advancing, coronavirus is not spreading, they're not social distancing, they're not shutting down the businesses. Where there is a need to take action, they're taking action. Where there is no need to take action, they're not taking any. Now, here's the interesting thing about the reaction there in Japan. Now, I want you to consider this. Tokyo has a population of 37,393,000. It is the most densely populated city in the world. Okay, here we go. Tokyo, 37,393,000 in population, most densely populated city in the world. They have 4,477 cases, and they've had 141 people die. So they're taking appropriate measures to the spread in the regions where things are becoming more serious. Japan overall has a population of 126 million. And 126 million people, they have 14,304 or 305 cases and a total of 455 deaths in the whole country. So they're looking at it logically. They're not being pushed by some type of progressive agenda. They're saying, hey, you know what? We had a major advancement here in these particular areas in the past 10 days. So let's take some more aggressive measures. And that's exactly what they're doing. Now, as we've been talking about and mentioned in time past, there is an agenda that is being advanced in other areas that is going to play into what happens during the tribulation period. We know during the tribulation, there's going to be one man in control of the whole world. Revelation 17 says he's going to have 10 others who are with him. He'll break ties with 3 of them, and there'll be 7 that end up being given responsibilities over certain portions of the world. And 7 plus 1, I think, is still 8, right? There are 8 continents in the world, so you have to wonder if this isn't how the world is going to be broken up. But we also know that he's going to employ a means by which all commerce is going to be governed. You can't buy or sell unless you have a mark or the number of his name on your hand or your forehead, and that name being the name of the Antichrist or the beast of Revelation 13, whoever that is. Now, interesting that the Business Insider says, Bill Gates says the world would need as many as 14 billion doses of coronavirus vaccine to stop the virus. 14 billion doses. And the reason he said that is you don't know if it's going to be a 1 or 2 dose vaccine. It's very possible. And by the way, Bill Gates happens to be in the vaccine business. So 14 billion units sold would probably be a pretty good payday. And we need to make billions of those doses to get them out to every part of the world. And we need this to happen as quickly as possible, Gates is quoted as saying. He said he has his eyes on 8 to 10 promising candidates, adding that healthcare workers and people in low-income countries should be the first in line since once we find one that works. So again, there's that type of progressive thinking being employed in this realm as well. Gates went on to say in the article that they need to manufacture and distribute initially at least 7 billion doses of the vaccine, adding that number could be 14 billion if it's a multi-dose vaccine. Now, you know, it's kind of interesting because if we think about what we're dealing with a virus. I think most of us have basic working knowledge of the difference between a virus and an infection. Now, they're both composed of microbes, but a virus is different in that an infection or a bacterial infection, a bacteria is actually a cell. It's a living organism. It can replicate by itself. However, the microbes in a virus are different. They don't have a body. They don't have a cell wall. They're wrapped in a protein, and they need another living cell that they invade and basically cause to mutate and destroy in order to replicate. And that's why viruses cannot be treated with antibiotics, as we know bacterial infections are. But we also know that vaccines are limited in their capacity. We have flu vaccines. Many of you get the flu shot every year, but yet we still have 60,000 people who die of the flu. More than that, 500,000 people die around the world. The average number for the flu is 1 billion people around the world get the flu every year, and a little over 455,000 people, again, on average, die every year. The numbers in the United States range between 25,000 to 80,000 people. And so you've got an average somewhere in the high to mid 30,000 people that die of the flu every year right here in the United States, many of them who have a vaccine, who have taken the vaccine. So this isn't going to be something that ends the spread of COVID-19 or SARS-2 COVID-19 as it's called. It's just going to be a vehicle that allows each person to receive a digital identity, and therefore they can be tracked as to whether or not they have had the vaccination. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to stop the advance of the coronavirus or COVID-19 or anything else. So we are seeing things, again, that play into what's going to happen or be manifested fully during the tribulation period. Now, last time we talked a little bit about egalitarianism, and part of this progressive thinking is everybody has to make the same amount of money. There can't be any 1%ers except for those in charge, of course, and they can make as much as they want and have as much as they want. But though the rest of us little people, we have to all be receiving what the government has deemed appropriate for us. Now, I want to read to you something from Forbes magazine. And the headline says, stimulus proposal, $2,000 payment plus $1,000 per month until 1 year after the COVID-19 crisis ends. The CARES Act provided many Americans with financial relief in the form of a $1,200 stimulus check. But as that program rolls out, it has become apparent to lawmakers that more financial assistance is needed. There are currently several proposals from lawmakers that would provide Americans with ongoing financial support. And if approved, the ABC Act would provide every American with a Boost debit card preloaded with $2,000. The card would be reloaded with $1,000 each month until 1 year after the COVID-19 crisis ends. Well, we just talked about the fact that a vaccine isn't going to bring it to an end. It may help some people, but it's certainly not going to help all people, because nothing does when you're talking about a flu-type virus, which COVID-19 is exactly that. The bill calls for the use of prepaid credit cards to assist those who are unbanked or do not have access to check cashing services. Who would be eligible for the $2,000 stimulus payment and $1,000 recurring payment? The goal of this bill, listen to this, is to guarantee no one is left behind. As written, the bill would provide a $2,000 prepaid debit card to everyone, including, listen, taxpayers, dependents, non-citizens, and individuals who do not have a bank account, social security number, or permanent address, people living in unincorporated territories or protectorates, and Americans living abroad. Also, dependents. The proposal gives an example of a family with 4 dependents being eligible to receive a prepaid debit card for each taxpayer and each dependent. For example, a couple with 2 children would receive 4 debit cards of $2,000 each, or a total of $8,000, and then $4,000 a month ongoing after that. Excuse me. Non-citizens, this would include permanent residents, undocumented individuals, and temporary visitors who would stay exceed 3 months. They would receive prepaid debit cards, $1,000 each month until 1 year after the coronavirus ends. Now, who's that creating a dependency on? Obviously, it's creating a dependency on the government. And this is all priming the pump for what's going to happen when one man rises to power and say, here, listen, here's how we're going to get through all this. Here's how we need to deal with these things. Now, just a couple more things and I'll let you all go. Don't want to spend too much time on a Sunday afternoon. And I know many of you got a chance to hear Amir's update on what's happening in the Middle East earlier. But here's an interesting story coming from CBS News. I don't have COVID-19, by the way. I've got a fan blowing and it's tickling my throat. I have to keep the window closed because it's hot in here and don't want to pick up the street noise. CBS News says murder hornets have now entered the U.S. and they could decimate the honeybee population. Now, we've been reporting on World News Briefing stories over the past couple of years about this massive die-off of honeybees, which we know in the pollination process for the food supply, they play a critical role. And yet here we've had millions and millions of them dying off in different portions of the world for the last couple of years. And now we have murder hornets, as they have been dubbed, have entered the U.S. and they could, through some means, I guess competition, decimate the honeybee population, which is, again, going to impact the food supply. Forbes magazine reports East Africa is bracing for a locust outbreak 20 times worse than the last one they just went through. And East Africa is anticipating a larger wave of the worst locust outbreak seen in 7 decades. Swarms of billions of insects that are exacerbated by the already vulnerable region and the coronavirus pandemic impact. And the United Nations and Food and Agriculture Organization said the swarm of locusts present an extremely alarming, unprecedented threat to food security and livelihoods. And according to the UN, A locust swarm of just more than a third of a square mile can eat the same amount of food in a single day as 25,000 people would eat. Now, here's why I wanted to bring that up. And here's the whole point of our time together today. We know that we cannot know the day or the hour that the Lord is going to come for the church. We know there's coming a time that has never been seen in world history. As Jesus put it, if he didn't come back and bring it to an end, nobody would survive it. It is that cataclysmic, and it's going to bring about massive destruction of human life and property during the tribulation period. And there are things that are going to happen that are related to the things we're talking about today. And as I said, we're greasing the skids, priming the pump, or whatever adage you want to use or cliche you want to assign to getting things ready for the Antichrist to rise to power. But there's something else, and here's why I wanted to mention those last two stories. We know that during the tribulation, when the first seal is open, there's 4 horsemen who ride out in Revelation 6 onto the world scene. We're told that the first guy rides out on a white horse and he brings peace to the world. He has a bow, but we're not told that he carries with that bow any arrows or munitions. Now, the implication there is that he is going to bring about a pseudo peace to the world, and he's going to do so through diplomacy. He's going to come and answer the cry that the people in the world have of peace and safety, or peace and security, a desire that the whole world shares today more and more. And the coronavirus pandemic has advanced that in people's thinking and emotions like nothing before in history. Now, a lot of people think that this is, because he's on a white horse, this is a picture of Jesus. No, it's not a picture of Jesus. We know because of the rider on the second horse who takes peace from the earth. Now listen, if Jesus does something, nobody can stop it. Nobody can take a peace that he gives or brings about. So the first rider is the Antichrist. He is not Jesus Christ. And the second rider brings a devastation on the world through not war in the sense that we know it, or not exclusively that, but some of the language there in Revelation under the rider of the second horse talks about people killing each other, hand-to-hand combat. And the reason for that is because a loaf of bread, in essence, or a quart of barley or wheat, is going to cost a day's pay. Now that could mean, depending on what a day's pay means to you, that could mean that a loaf of bread is going to cost $100 or $200. Anyway, what the number is irrelevant, because what it means is food is going to be scarce. And then after the famine, the next thing that comes when the fourth horse rides out, the pale horse who brings death, it's going to be disease that sweeps the world. Now, we all know what we're experiencing now. We're learning more about things we probably never wanted to know more about, but we're learning about viruses, and we're learning about their spread. We're learning about how some are more infectious than others, and we're learning about the fact that the world is someday going to be controlled by a small group of people in power and ultimately be led by one man. And you can call this whatever you like. You can call it a conspiracy theory if you like. But as I said at the outset, these people are out of the closet. They're saying, as Newsom has said, this is an opportunity to advance progressivism, and we're going to exploit it. And it's happening. And it's happening all over the world. It's happening all over our country. And the coronavirus, as sad and tragic as it is, that people are losing their lives, just like it's sad and tragic that people lose their lives every year from the flu that visits the world every season, every flu season from October 1st to the May 1st, as we just came out of flu season, and we had an aggressive one, some are saying. And just like we see these things and know these things, and they're tragic, and every loss of life is precious, and we need to be praying for people who have lost family members. And we don't want to downplay the severity of this either, because from what I understand, those who die of COVID-19, it's a brutal death. It's basically they suffocate, and this attacks their lungs. And like we said, because the microbe doesn't have its own cell, but it's wrapped in a protein, it has to attack other cells and shut them down and cause them to become malignant or cancerous, in the sense that they destroy their normal form and function. And we don't want to minimize that at all, nor do we want to fail to recognize that this thing is extremely infectious. I mean, it spreads easily, but we also need to recognize that it isn't as deadly as they have said. And everything that they have said has proved to be untrue. So there, as far as the models go and the predictions of the fatality rate. But let's not forget either that all of this plays into what God has said is going to happen in the last days. Now, one of the important things to remember, I'll let you go with this last thought. We need to recognize that these things have to be in place before the tribulation, because the tribulation is of such a short duration and the Antichrist reign is of a limited duration as well, that these mechanisms need to be operational prior to their implementation during the tribulation. And that's why I say we are seeing things moving towards that. The shift in thinking today, the egalitarianism that's predominant, and as I said, 84% of Democratic candidates for any office in the 2020 election claim to be progressives or identify as a progressive. Now, this tells us there's been a major shift in thinking, and especially we all see it in young people today as well. This injustice, the social injustice that's been taught in our universities is now permeated and trickled down into everyone's thinking, and therefore we have to have a change, is what they're saying. And like Newsom said, without hesitation and without shame, we need to change our thinking about how we govern. And this pandemic is the opportunity to do so. So Jesus is coming. There's no question about that. Could be today, could be tomorrow. No man knows the day or the hour. But we're told to live with a sense of wisdom and expectancy that the Lord could come at any moment. And we are to rejoice in the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who is coming again, first to take the church out of this world, then to judge the world, and then to come back with the church to rule the world and run things on this planet the way they were intended to be all along. So that's our update for today. And again, I mentioned this the other day on World News Briefing. People, often ask, how do you talk about such bad news or read such bad news all the time? Well, it is bad news in a sense, and there's a lot of negative stories, but there's nothing negative about Jesus coming back, the trumpet sounding, you and I being supernaturally translated instantaneously into immortal, incorruptible beings to be forever with the Lord. There's nothing negative about that. So in that, let's end on that positive note. Jesus is coming soon. God bless you. Get out there and tell people about Jesus. We're running out of time to do so. Listen, he's the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except by him. You can't be saved by being a good moral person. The Bible says, God has stated, I've inspected all of humanity. There's none good, no, not one. Therefore, everyone needs a Savior. The Savior is identified as the Holy One of Israel, Jesus Christ the righteous, the Son of God. And yes, I know there are those 1.6 billion Muslims believe that God couldn't have a son. Well, yes, he could, because by definition, God means a supreme being. And the supreme being means he is exclusive in the fact that he has capabilities and capacities that nobody else has. And therefore, if God says that my son is going to be born into the world, and even the eternal Godhead, the triune nature of God, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit have always been there. And God the Son was manifested in human flesh, so he would have the capacity to death. And listen, not only could God have a son, he had to have a son, because a human death could not satisfy the sin debt for the whole world. It had to be a supernatural being who came into the world in the form of Emmanuel, God with us, so that his blood, which was completely pure because he was sinless, could satisfy the sin debt for all mankind. Leviticus 17:11 says, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. And therefore, through the Passover lambs for 1,500 years, we were told through Israel that an innocent victim must shed his blood so others' sin could be covered. And that Lamb of God, who John the Baptist said came to take away the sins of the world, is none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And he is the only way anyone can be saved. No one comes to the Father except through him. Now, that's exclusive? Absolutely. But it's also true, and it's also proven, because early in the morning on the first day of the week, 3 days after Jesus was brutally murdered, and laid in a tomb. He rose from the dead and is alive forevermore. Jesus is the first one to die, raise again, and stay alive for all eternity. And you and I can have that future too, but it's only through him. Somebody else needs to know that. Somebody you know needs to hear that today. So go out and tell somebody about Jesus. And next few days, we'll do another update. Things are happening so fast. And let me just say again, as I mentioned at church this morning, and I want to encourage you, if you didn't hear the message at church this morning, I think you should jump on Facebook and find the Calvary Chapel Tustin page. It's on this page too, if you want to watch it there. And the next couple of days, it'll be up on YouTube too. And it was just a word of encouragement for us all that there's hope in the middle of storms. And we use Jesus walking on the water and the story surrounding that to prove it to be so. So love you all, and look forward to seeing you who call CCT home someday. And maybe it will be when we are in the presence of the Lord forever, perhaps today. God bless you all. See you soon.
I, you.